Hello and welcome to my channel if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, but if it is not, welcome back. Today I am going to be talking about a new favorite series, and that is the Blackthorn and Grim trilogy by Juliet Marillier. I began this series last year and really enjoyed it, but then I finished book 2 and book 3 in the last month or so, and I just fell even more in love with this world and with these characters. I finished the final book about a week or two ago now, and I'm still thinking about these characters. I'm still thinking about Blackthorn and Grim and how much I enjoyed their journey and their development from the first page of book 1 to the last page of book 3. So I'm going to take the opportunity and the time to talk through this series today and explain why I enjoyed it so much and just sing its praises a little bit, with the hope that it might inspire someone to also pick up this trilogy. And for this video, I actually have 2 drink pairings that I would like to share. And the first one is a nice cup of tea. And this is because having a brew is something that is quite prominent or prevalent throughout the Blackthorn and Grim trilogy. It's something that they often do together, and it's something that one character will ask the other in moments of distress or discomfort in order to provide them a little bit of stability, a little bit of familiarity, and a little bit of comfort. And it is true that a cup of tea can feel very healing in those moments. So when I sat down to film this video, I knew that I had to include a cup of tea, and I did include it in this flower petal mug because the fair folk do feature quite prominently throughout the trilogy too, and this feels very fae inspired. However, the distilled beverage pairing for today's video is a simple glass of mead, and I had to pair mead with this video because mead does feature throughout the trilogy at one very pivotal moment in the series, and then there's a very cute call back to it in the final book that I really enjoyed. So I picked up a local collaboration between a meadery and a distillery to pair with this video, and I think Blackthorn and Grim would approve. So cheers. I don't have mead very often. I think I can count on one hand how many times I've had it, but this is a really nice number. It is slightly sparkling. The bubbles have pretty much dispersed at this point because I did spill this trying to get a thumbnail for the video. So if the video that you clicked on does not feature this glass of mead in the thumbnail, please know that it was not for lack of trying on my part, but even though it's been sloshed around a few times, it does still have quite an effervescent mouthfeel, but it's very clean, very simple. There's no extra fruit added into it, so this is just a straight honey wine mead, and it's really delicious. I don't often drink mead, but I think this might become my new go-to if I get that craving. So just quickly, before I dive into my review of these books, I do want to say that I'm going to be trying my absolute hardest to keep this video spoiler free because I'm someone who hates to run into spoilers for a book series, but I am going to be going into each book one by one, so you can kind of skip around with the chapters below if you have begun this series but not finished it, and pick and choose what parts that will appeal most to you to improve and enhance your reading experience. So the Blackthorn and Grim books take place in an ancient Ireland setting. The language that is used, the names that feature throughout these books is very Celtic inspired and is very, very reminiscent to ancient Ireland. Fae, fairies, the fair folk feature quite prominently and very similar to Celtic lore with how the fairies live underground or in a realm that kind of mirrors the human world. That is the world that Marillier creates and describes within Blackthorn and Grim. And in this era of ancient Ireland, most people no longer believe in the fair folk. So if you stumble across a fey creature who takes advantage of you, or if there is a changeling found in the village, you're not taken seriously and you're ostracized within your circle of friends and families more often than not. But all of that to say is that within this world as well, the role of a wise woman, someone who is very in tune with nature, with the more mystical, with the more supernatural, it's often looked down upon by most of the characters, by plenty of the characters that we come across within this book. And Blackthorn is a wise woman by trade, but because of that derision, she often introduces herself throughout the course of these 3 books as a healer. So Blackthorn is one of the main characters that we follow, and the second main character is Grim, who is a protector figure. He is kind of a jack of all trades and can kind of pitch in and do whatever work is required of him, and he is very much that personality, willing to get in, do manual labor, and do whatever is necessary to make sure that things run smoothly. But those are the roles that Blackthorn and Grim step into throughout the course of the trilogy and reclaim. Because at the beginning of Dreamer's Pool, we are introduced to them in jail. They are confined, they have faced torture, they are facing certain death. And then our first Fae character is introduced, and he offers Blackthorn a bargain. And we all know that Fae bargains can be a little bit sticky and tricky. So Blackthorn needs to agree to the rules and terms of this bargain for 7 years. There's a task that she must undertake. There are rules that she cannot break. And if she does, the Fae character, Conmael, will send her right back into prison. That's the threat. That's the consequence if she breaks this bargain. So that's where the series begins. We're following these 2 characters escaping confinement, setting out on this task, feeling freedom for the first time in at least a year. I know Blackthorn was confined. I don't know how long Grim was in the jail for, but we're following them facing down 7 years of having to abide by these Fae rules. And the series, the trilogy, takes place over the course of 2 to 3 years. And I really loved the way that Marillier ended this trilogy because everything was resolved, but there was still the room for more growth and more exploration. I found it to be really, really well done. What I really, really loved about this trilogy is that it is an amazing blend of both character-driven stories and plot-driven stories, because there's the overarching plot throughout this trilogy that is very character-focused. We're following Blackthorn and Grim learn how to be free within the world again, learn what they want out of life for themselves and for each other perhaps, and how to live a life after such a traumatic experience, how to live with that trauma, how to grow with that trauma, and how to exist with it and not become a husk of one's self. That's the overarching theme and plot of this trilogy. But then each individual book introduces an antagonist, and there is a slight mystery-esque element, there's heavy supernatural themes. And I really enjoyed each antagonist that was depicted within the books, how they interacted with the characters, and how it was resolved within that specific book. So building off of that, the themes that appear within these 3 books are themes of hope, resilience, perseverance, strength. I wouldn't say that this is a love story per se, but the different facets of love, which is something I love in my books, it is depicted within this series. Because Blackthorn and Grim need to learn how to trust another individual and then they become companions, and then they become friends, and then perhaps they become a little bit more. But that's not the core focus of this story, I would say. Love is definitely a recurrent theme throughout this trilogy, but I wouldn't say that this is a romance. It's definitely a historical fantasy, and there are also darker themes that appear throughout these books of depression and self-loathing and murder and death and grief and really heavy, heavy themes. And I think Marillier did an excellent job about discussing those heavier subjects, that heavier subject matter, while also providing a little bit of light or hope at the end of the tunnel for these characters who have withstood so much and continue to persevere even when they don't feel as if they can. Another thing that I really enjoyed and appreciated about this trilogy is that our main characters are a little bit older. There's nothing wrong with reading about that 17-year-old fantasy protagonist, but there's something so comforting for me as someone who's approaching 30 to read about those older characters. So Blackthorn is in her 30s, and before she was wrongly jailed, she lived two very different lives, and that influences and impacts her actions. And it's part of the reason why she is so scared to trust and so scared to open herself back up, because she is afraid that she's going to be hurt again the way she has been hurt in the past. She is a wise woman, she is a healer, so she's very in tuned to the natural world, and there's so many beautiful, gorgeous depictions and descriptions of her going out and gathering the herbs she needs and making the salves. And she does have a little bit of magic that she can use to influence the natural world, which I absolutely loved. She is a character that I felt such empathy towards. She's very quick to anger. She's very quick to lash out. She just wants to be left alone. She wants to put her head down, get through the days. She doesn't want to interact with anyone else. And as a result of the trauma that she has experienced, she is very angry at the whole world, which ties into why she just wants to be left alone. She has a lot of anger in her, and she very much hates the one particular figure that she lays the appropriate amount of blame on. But her anger kind of leaks out and attacks those around her, even though she sometimes feels immediate remorse and regret for lashing out. She is very quick to anger, and she's very angry at the world, although justifiably so once you learn her story. Grim is this very docile man who appears level-headed when you compare him to Blackthorn, but he is carrying such heavy trauma as well. And even though he doesn't lash out with his anger at other people, he lashes out at himself. So when you immerse yourself within his POV chapters, he's so often lashing out at himself and talking down to himself that he has just as much anger as Blackthorn. It's just not visible. And Grim finds redemption in a way, or he is seeking redemption by embracing that protector role after him and Blackthorn embark on the road together. Like I've already said, each book introduces a new compelling mystery at its core. There's a new antagonist in each book, but there's also that overarching antagonist that we meet or hear of for the first time in book one, and they are a recurrent character that is appearing and interfering with Blackthorn and Grim's journey right until the very end. So I really enjoyed the way that not only are there individual antagonists that are introduced, but there is that continuity with that one same antagonist, and it really does interconnect the trilogy very well. But diving into each book, starting with, of course, Dreamer's Pool. This is the introduction, this is the setup, this is where we meet Blackthorn and Grim in that prison, and we follow along with them on their journey from that territory into a different clan's territory as per the Fae's instructions and requirements. Conmael has told them that they need to go to Dal Riata and live there for the 7 years, and Blackthorn cannot come back home throughout that time. However, once Blackthorn and Grim arrive, the Crown Prince, Oren, learns of their arrival and he seeks out the help of a wise woman because his betrothed has arrived, but she is absolutely nothing like the person who he interacted with and got to know throughout their courtship, which took place entirely over letters. So he does not believe that she is really who she is saying that she is, but of course no one believes him. So he asks Blackthorn for her help in getting to the bottom of this matter. And it says here on the back that to save Oren from his disastrous nuptials, Blackthorn and Grim will need courage, ingenuity, and more than a little magic. And they move into this beautiful little cottage that's on the outskirts of this very magical forest, and the setting that is depicted within Dreamer's Pool is just gorgeous. It's so evocative, and I wanted to be setting up shop in their little cabin too. I really enjoyed the introduction to this world. I think I gave it 4 stars, but it was a very solid introduction. It was just very bleak at the beginning. So if you are planning on picking this up, definitely plan for some really heavy chapters near the beginning when Blackthorn and Grim are still in that very heavy fog and so literally in prison. And Blackthorn is recounting some of the torture that she has experienced. So this was, I think, perhaps the heaviest book. This is also Blackthorn's book. So yes, we were introduced to Blackthorn and Grim at the beginning, but we learn why Blackthorn is so bitter, is so angry. At about the midpoint in this book, we learn about the life she lived before she was wrongly jailed. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. There is death that takes place, and if you want to learn a little bit more about the content warnings, definitely leave me a comment below and I'll be sure to kind of walk through them with you, because I wasn't expecting this book to be quite so heavy. Next is Tower of Thorns. And at the beginning of this book, Grim and Blackthorn are quite settled into their little life in Dal Riata. They have their little cottage all set up, and they are as content as they can be to wait out the next 7 years or so until the bargain that Blackthorn has agreed to ends. But of course, there is something that takes place, and in this instance, it is a noble woman who has come to the Crown Prince, who has come to Oren and asked for his assistance because on her land there is this strange tower that always was there, but now there is this strange creature locked inside of it who is screaming all day, and this tower is encircled with thorns. It's impossible to get through, but there is a rumor that this took place centuries before or 50 years before, and the thorns will part on Midsummer's Day. So she comes to the Crown Prince seeking his assistance, seeking his help to try and get someone to her land to help break this curse and to help kill this supernatural character being, this monster that is screaming at all hours of the day. And Oren turns to Blackthorn because he knows that she has a handle on supernatural things and she has a way of working out sticky situations. So Blackthorn doesn't have to go and help this noblewoman. I do believe that Oren doesn't outright tell her that she must, but she feels the need that she has to, and the bargain does play a part in this. And of course, where Blackthorn goes, Grim also goes. So the two of them are uprooted from their relatively comfy life, and have to go with this noblewoman and live on her land and try to figure out this curse, when it was created, who enacted this curse, how do they break it, and what's going to take place after they break it. Because once they get into this noblewoman's home, things are very strange. The people who care for her home, her servants, there's something just not quite right about them. And while all of this is taking place in the forefront of the book, we are learning Grimm's story in Tower of Thorns. While Dreamer's Pool is very much Blackthorn's book in that we learn her backstory, Tower of Thorns is Grimm's book, and we are learning why he is so hard on himself, why he hates himself so much, and what took place to him before he was also wrongly jailed at the beginning of the first book. And his story was just so heartbreaking. It was as heartbreaking as Blackthorn's, but in very different ways. There are still very, very heavy themes in this book of grief and depression and self-loathing, and it made it a very difficult read. But I think because I had already gotten to know these characters so well, both Blackthorn's struggle in Tower of Thorns and Grimm's struggle in Tower of Thorns impacted me a little bit more than they did in Dreamer's Pool, because I was that much closer to these characters and that much more connected. So you can imagine that by the time I picked up Den of Wolves, I was so invested in these characters. I have said this before and I'll say it again, that I just wanted Blackthorn and Grim to be happy and healthy and safe and warm. And Marillier definitely threw them to the wolves in this final book in this trilogy. They spend most of Den of Wolves apart because Blackthorn has been asked by the Crown Princess of Dalriada to look out for and look after this young girl who has come into their care. And at this same time, Grim has been recruited by this girl's father to go to their estate, Wolf Glen, and to help finish building this mystical house that is potentially quite magical. There's a lot of lore and mystery surrounding it. And while Grim is commuting back and forth, for lack of a better terms, he realizes that this girl's father is keeping the master architect behind this big house, this dwelling, essentially under lock and key, and is keeping him confined and treating him really horribly. And obviously confinement is a massive theme throughout these books, so that does not sit well with Grim, and it enacts his very fierce protective nature. So he begins staying at Wolf Glen 24/7 in order to keep an eye on this man who he kind of takes under his wing. And it says here on the back that there is danger on two fronts, and Blackthorn and Grim are faced with a heartbreaking choice: to stand once again by each other's side or to fight their battles alone. And that's because Marillier does bring back the antagonist that is introduced for the first time in Dreamer's Pool. So while Grim and Blackthorn are trying to individually figure out what is happening with this girl and what her father is doing, that threat from their past comes back, and Blackthorn is faced with a really, really difficult choice, not only on whether if she wants to be by Grim's side, but if she is willing to adhere to the bargain that she made with Conmiel. She is tempted throughout Tower of Thorns and throughout Dreamer's Pool to break this bargain, but that temptation is ratcheted up about 10 million notches in this final book. And the conclusion was so well done, both to that smaller mystery of Wolf Glen and this young girl who is very different and so in tune with nature, and also with the antagonist from Blackthorn and Grim's past. So I absolutely adored this series, and I think if you are someone who enjoys historical fantasy, this trilogy will be right up your alley. But if you have an interest in historical fiction, this would be a great entry point into fantasy. And likewise, if you have an interest in maybe delving more into historical fiction, but predominantly read fantasy, this would be a great entry point too, because it really does straddle those two genres. If you have any interest or are a reader of historical fiction, magical realism, or fantasy books, I do think that the world Marillier presents within these 3 books is one that might appeal to you. And if you are a fantasy romance fan, as I am, the romance is not quite so heavy here because they go from strangers to companions to friends and maybe something more. But I do think that if you like a slow burn romance, you will enjoy this trilogy. I really adored Blackthorn and Grim. I found the relationship that was depicted on the page to be incredibly realistic and believable for 2 characters who have experienced such hardship and have experienced such trauma and sexual trauma as well. I think Marillier did a just incredible, excellent job at depicting realistic romance and realistic love within the pages of her 3 books here. But I think that is where I will leave things today. If you have any questions about these books, please let me know down in a comment below because I'd love to chat with you about them. For now, this is going to be it for me. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will be back soon with a new one. Bye for now.